Well, welcome to the lunch and seminars here, and it's my absolute pleasure to be here with Jim Milburn, my great friend from Ochsner, and Eitan Raz from NYU, so thank you for being here today. We're over here at Imperative Care. We're going to talk for a few minutes about some things. So Jim, you know, what have been some of the limitations when you think about guide catheters for stroke? Like, talk me through that.
Well, first of all, congratulations on a great meeting, Justin. I think you've done a great job as program chair, you and Jeremy, so shout out to you. Thank you for the question. As far as guide catheters for stroke, we've always wanted a catheter that we could take intracranially as far as we can, close to the clot, and why not? You know, we do that for aneurysms, that's the paradigm. Get it as close as you can, and you know, but you needed a catheter with the right transition zones and trackability and tip softness. So I think that we're going to talk about that today.
Oh, thank you. Fantastic. And so Eitan, you know, I know you use the Zoom 88. So why don't you take us through that and tell us about what you've had experience with?
Yeah, sure. Thank you for the question. So first of all, let me talk a little about the catheter. This is a 088 inner diameter catheter, 110 centimeter long, and that fits through an 8 French sheath. What is unique about this is indeed the length that makes it possible to get intracranial, and it's made of a very supported proximal part, good to give support at the level of the aorta, but very distal flexible segments. Specifically, the last 18.5 centimeter are pretty soft and made it so we can go through in the intracranial aspect. These specific features of the catheter gives really like what we call it a position of advantage, meaning that this ultra flexible distal portion makes it possible to go through these last turns of the ICA, where we call it the 6 turns in 10 centimeter, something that gives you a position of advantage compared to the more conventional catheters that are made just to stay at the level of the distal ICA. Now, being a different catheters is really necessitate a more like that specific technique, and specifically here we call the ICE technique, meaning initially you want to bring the catheter up, what we call it the initial ascent. You want to bring this Zoom 88 as high as possible in the distal ICA, or even better in the cavernous segment, over your usual 5 French, 6 French catheter over a 35 or 38. Once you get that position, you're going to climb the system, and you're going to climb it over your aspiration catheter. In this case, it's a 71. You get to the clot with a 71, and then you climb your Zoom 88 over all the way as close as possible to the clot. So this is going to limit the distance that the aspiration catheter is going to have to travel before getting incorporated into the sheath. So these are 2 videos from a case of mine in which you see here in the first one, you see the ascent. You know, like here we're bringing up the Zoom 88 over a 5 French catheter, and you see on this video on the right how once we reach at the cavernous segment, once we reach at the petrous segment, we can really like try to push and get to the cavernous segment. Once we're there in position, now it's time to get to the clot. So here we have a clot at the level of an M2, and here we have the 88, and we're going to go over to the clot with a 71 over, in this case, an Aristotle guide wire. We get to the clot, and here it's the navigation of the Zoom 71 over the wire. Once we get to the level of the clot, now it's time to pull the wire back. So we pull back the wire. We're going to pull a little on the 71 to remove the slack. And then over that, now we're going to bring our Zoom 88 over the system up to, in this situation, in this particular case, at the level of the M1. So now the distance that the 71 has to travel is much less. These are before and after. It was a 1-pass TK3 result in this particular case. Another example, you know, a little more distal clot. In this case here, the clot is at the level of a more distal M2. So here I'm going to use a Zoom 55 catheter. And here is the video. We get to the clot with a Zoom 55, sorry, here. And now we're going to travel our Zoom 88 over the 55 up to the level of the M1. And once we're there in position, we're going to pull back and aspirate the clot. And this is the final result. Again, TK3, 1 pass.
That's great. That's great. And you know, I'm hearing the same theme over and over again, which is getting distal. So Jim, what's your thought process on that? Like, why is it so important?
Well, there's several reasons. Thanks for asking again. First of all, as we all know, what can be challenging about a stroke case with aspiration is getting that initial catheter beyond the ophthalmic, and occasionally it does catch on a big ophthalmic lip. So usually, or what we used to have to do was manipulate the distal catheter and wire to try to kind of get it beyond. Now what we can do is bring up the 88 or the other catheter and the guide, and that will actually deflect it off of the ophthalmic wall. And it might take a couple maneuvers, but it works almost every time if you do have this problem. So that's a great advantage. You don't have to mess with the distal intracranial wire and catheter. Secondly, why would you not want to get it as close to the clot as you're aspirating and pulling down? It's just less chance of dropping off the clot as you're pulling it into the catheter and embolizing a new territory. And then there is an element of flow control, and models have shown this, and we're going to talk about that a little bit, but the farther you get the catheter, the less blood flow there is around. It may not be completely occlusive, but there's a lot of flow control. So between the three, you're getting quite an advantage.
Eitan, what do you think about that?
It's absolutely true. Thank you, Jim. In here, and this is a very good video that can show that that concept about the ophthalmic artery navigation. And here you have your, Zoom 71 trying to go through, and you find an obstacle in the ophthalmic artery, something we're all very familiar with. Now, having the Zoom 88 at the level just proximal to that is going to change the anatomy just a little, and that change of anatomy may indeed be favorable to overcome that and pass the ophthalmic artery. And so this is certainly something that the fact of having there the Zoom 88. The other very good thing is the flow control that you can get. And by being very distal with your Zoom 88, again, as I show you in my cases up to the level of the M1, that is going to essentially act as a balloon guide catheter. You're going to be occlusive there, like change the direction of the flow in your PCOM and the ACOM, and that's going to help in many ways, especially with the emboli new territory. And this was shown actually also in this abstract that was presented at this conference by Dr. Burns from Northern Arizona University.
That's great. That's great. Now, Jim, I know you've got some new data you're presenting at the annual meeting here. Can you share some of that with us?
Correct, yes. I'm excited. I have a couple of abstracts on the Zoom system and about stroke. And as I was looking at my single center experience with Zoom, I noticed that, boy, it seems like there's a great advantage to getting the catheter high in these cases. So I decided to do a secondary evaluation just looking at only guide catheter positions. So if I took all of the cases we looked at and just decided, marked where the guide catheter was. So if it was extracranial, and that was 40 cases, versus intracranial, meaning Petrus to M1, and there was a significant difference in TICI 2C or better reperfusion, first pass, final pass, and then on average 10 minutes shorter time. So I thought that was very powerful data, and it's single center, sure, but we're going to look at that with other centers, and I'm pretty excited about this data. I think we might be onto something, and I'm interested to see how that plays out.
That's fantastic. Thank you. I have one question in our last few seconds together. Have you tried this radially?
Not yet, because the version that we have is not FDA approved for radial access, but there's a new version coming up very, very soon, and we're all excited about it.
Fantastic. Well, thank you both for being here today, and thank you to Imperative Care.